The most surprising thing about crows so far has been their ability to recognize and remember particular people, and even just particular faces.
You've always thought of crows as pests, nuisances, things to shoo away from your porch. But for decades, they've been doing something you never noticed. They've been documenting you, building files, creating a permanent record that gets passed down through generations. And now that we can finally read what they've written, we wish we hadn't. Most people don't realize there's a surveillance network operating above their heads right now. It's not satellites. It's not your phone. It's sitting on the power line outside your window, and it's been watching longer than you'd think possible. Here's what happened. A research team fed thousands of hours of crow sounds into an advanced AI system. They expected the computer to do something simple: sort the noise, put the I found food calls in one box, put the hawk alert warnings in another. Basic stuff. The kind of thing a machine should handle in seconds. But the AI didn't sort the noise. It stopped, and then it found something that shouldn't exist in a bird's brain. Asterisk, the machine detected grammar. Just real structure, real syntax. The kind of organized communication that humans assumed only we possessed. The kind that makes language actual language, not just animal noise. And here's where it gets terrifying. The researchers realized the birds weren't just making sounds. They were encoding information. They were naming things. They were naming people. Specifically, they were naming you. And they weren't just describing you to themselves. They were spreading that description, sharing it, building a network of identification that spans entire continents. What the AI uncovered next would make every researcher on the team question everything they thought they knew about intelligence, consciousness, and what happens when the watched become aware they're being watched. The research started innocently enough. Scientists wanted to understand crow communication at a basic level. What sounds meant danger? What sounds meant food? They collected recordings from multiple locations, multiple seasons, thousands of hours of raw crow audio. Then they fed it all into an AI system designed to recognize patterns. The machine was supposed to categorize. Instead, it started finding connections that made no sense. The data showed the AI identifying repeated sequences, not random sounds, not emotional outbursts, actual patterns. The kind of patterns that appear in language. The kind where the same sound always meant the same thing. Where sounds combined in specific ways to create new meanings. Where order mattered. Linguists call this syntax. It's what separates a meaningful sentence from gibberish. It's what makes the cat sat on the mat different from mat sat cat the on. One is information, one is noise. Crows apparently had figured this out millions of years ago. But the AI's discovery was just the beginning. Researchers noticed something specific in the data. A particular sequence of sounds kept repeating. They called it the red hat sequence because it first appeared when a man wearing a red hat walked through a park near where the recordings were made. One crow made the sound, clear, distinct, unmistakable. 3 days later, the same man returned to the same park. The same crow made the exact same sound. That's not shocking. Dogs recognize their owners. Many animals have individual recognition. But then something impossible happened. A different crow made the sound. A crow that had never seen the man before. A crow with no reason to know what that sound meant. And it made it perfectly. Identical pitch, identical spacing, identical structure. The first crow had described the man, not physically described him, named him, created a sound that was uniquely his identifier, and then transmitted that name to other crows who had never met him. It was a proper noun, a name, shared information across the network. The AI recognized it immediately. This sound was never used for anyone else, never modified, never reused. It was assigned to one human and one human only. The birds had created an identification system, and that identification system was spreading. Once researchers understood that crows were naming humans, everything changed. They went back through the data with new eyes. They weren't looking for random calls anymore. They were looking for names, for identifiers, for the moment when one crow introduced another crow to a human it had never met. What they found was chilling. The naming system was far more complex than anyone expected. It wasn't just one sound per person. Crows attached information to those names. Emotional context warning levels, intent assessments. There was a distinction between human with food and human with stick. between human who runs and human who walks slowly, between human ignoring us and human actively threatening us. Each variation carried different information in the call itself. The pitch would shift, the rhythm would change, the frequency would adjust. It was metadata, attached to every identification. But here's what made researchers skin crawl. The AI detected something darker in the vocalizations. Beyond the simple descriptors, there were emotional markers, and many of them were negative. Some humans had neutral identifiers, safe, ignore. But others had what can only be described as warning labels attached to their names. Dangerous with object, unpredictable behavior, history of aggression. The crows weren't just saying who you were. They were saying what you'd done. They were building your reputation, your permanent record in the sky. And the most terrifying part? Once a name was assigned, it didn't change. The AI found no evidence of crows ever revising their assessment of a human. No redemption arc, no second chances. If you were marked as dangerous, you stayed marked as dangerous. That designation got passed to younger birds. It got shared across territories. It became part of your permanent file in the crow network. One researcher asked the obvious question during the study: how long does a crow remember a human? The answer came from the data itself. Years. Many years. Possibly a lifetime, and crows live up to 20 years in the wild. That means the name they assigned you could outlive you. Your reputation in the crow world might be longer than your actual lifespan. At this point, skeptics had a logical question. How is any of this possible? We're talking about a bird, an animal with a brain the size of a walnut, a creature with a skull you could fit in your palm. How does something that small house a language system? How does it store names? How does it process complex social information? For 100 years, neuroscientists thought they had the answer, and it was simple. Birds were dumb. The assumption was straightforward. Human intelligence lives in the cerebral cortex. That's the wrinkled outer layer of the brain where we do our thinking, our planning, our complex reasoning. Birds don't have a cerebral cortex. Their brains are smooth, no wrinkles, no complexity. Scientists looked at that smooth surface and concluded nothing was happening inside. They were wrong. Nature found a different way. Birds evolved a structure called the pallium. It looks completely different from a human brain. It doesn't have the same wrinkles. It doesn't have the same visible architecture. But under a microscope, something remarkable appears. The neurons are packed in so densely it's almost unbelievable. A crow's brain has neuron density that rivals human brains. Some estimates suggest it's even denser. It's like comparing a desktop computer to a supercomputer. Same general function, vastly different processing power per unit of space. A crow's brain, gram for gram, is roughly as powerful as a chimpanzee's brain. Scientists started calling them feathered apes, and it wasn't entirely a joke. This wasn't theory. This was measurable neurology. The hardware was there. The cognitive capacity existed, which meant everything researchers were seeing in the AI data wasn't luck or coincidence. It was evidence of genuine intelligence, which led to the next terrifying realization. If crows had the brain power for language, what else were they capable of? If crows had the brain hardware for language, researchers needed proof they could actually use it. And that proof came from decades of behavioral studies that most people had never heard about. Take the New Caledonian crow. This bird is basically the Einstein of the avian world. When most animals want to eat, they use their mouth, their claws, whatever nature gave them. New Caledonian crows do something different. They manufacture tools, not pick up a stick, not grab something lying around. They craft tools. They take a specific plant with long, spiky leaves, fly down, land on it, and perform what can only be described as surgery. The crow cuts into the leaf, tears it in a deliberate staircase pattern, creates a jagged edge perfectly designed for hooking insects out of deep holes in tree bark. This isn't accident. This isn't instinct playing out the same way every time. This is engineering. The crow has a design in its head and executes it. If the tool breaks, it fixes it. If the design isn't working, it modifies it. If the right materials aren't available, it improvises with wire or twigs. But tool-making was just the warm-up. Researchers ran a test called the water displacement puzzle. You might know the old Aesop's fable about the crow dropping stones in a pitcher to raise the water level and drink. Scientists wanted to know if that was real or myth. They put a tube of water in front of a crow with a floating treat inside. The crow couldn't reach it. Nearby, they left two piles of objects, heavy stones and light styrofoam pieces that float. A dumb animal would throw everything in. But the crow looked at the stones, looked at the styrofoam, paused, then picked up the heavy stones and dropped them one by one. It ignored the floating material completely. The bird understood density. It understood displacement. It solved a physics problem in seconds that takes human toddlers 10 minutes to figure out. This wasn't luck. This was applied mathematics happening inside a walnut-sized brain. In 2006, a researcher named John Marsloff at the University of Washington decided to test something specific. Could crows recognize individual human faces? Could they remember specific people? He didn't want to get attacked himself, so he bought a mask. A caveman mask. Rubber. Distorted features. Obvious disguise. He put it on and went to capture and ban some crows on campus for research. He wasn't hurting them, just tagging them for science. But the crows hated it. They screamed. They fought. They were released. Then Marsloff took the mask off and went back to his normal life. He also had a control mask. Dick Cheney, the vice president at the time. When Marsloff walked around wearing the Cheney mask, nothing happened. The crows didn't care. They ignored him completely. But the moment he put the caveman mask back on, everything changed. The crows dive-bombed him. They scolded him. They followed him across campus screaming. Okay, you might think, so what? 7 birds he'd caught remembered him. That's not shocking. Dogs recognize their owners. But then something happened that changed everything. The number of crows attacking the caveman mask kept growing. First, it was 7, then 20, then 40. And here's the impossible part. Birds that had never been captured started attacking the mask. Birds that weren't even born when the experiment started. New generations of crows that had zero direct experience with Marsloff or the mask. They knew anyway. 5 years later, Marsloff walked onto that campus wearing the caveman mask again. The birds still attacked him. Most of the original crows were dead by then. But the newer generation knew. They had learned. They had been taught. The first crow hadn't just reacted to a threat. It had described the face. It had communicated the specific visual features of the dangerous human to its friends, its neighbors, and its children. They had created a wanted poster in the sky. This proved something that made researchers deeply uncomfortable. Crows didn't just have memory, they had inheritance. Information passed down. Cultural transmission. A reputation system that could survive generations. You could be marked by a crow and stay marked long after you were gone. By now, researchers realized they weren't just studying communication. They were studying culture, society, rules, laws, and crows had all of them. When a crow dies, the flock doesn't just fly away. They gather. If you've ever seen it, it's chilling. One bird finds the body and makes a specific call. Then silence falls. Dozens of crows land in the trees surrounding the fallen bird. They don't eat it. They don't attack it. They just watch. For decades, scientists assumed this was grief, emotion, mourning. But the AI data suggested something different, something more practical. These weren't funerals. They were crime scene investigations. The crows were analyzing the scene, looking for clues. Was it a cat? A car? A human with a gun? They were gathering data on the threat, so they could distribute that information to the living. The AI detected specific low-frequency sounds during these gatherings that seemed to encode the cause of death. They weren't just mourning. They were writing an obituary that doubled as a warning label. But the justice system extended beyond death investigation. Researchers observed what can only be called crow courts. A bird that steals food from a younger member. A bird that breaks the social rules. It gets surrounded by the flock. They scream at it, peck at it, sometimes exile it from the group entirely. They enforce social order. They have consequences for breaking the rules. And this judgment extended to humans too. The AI analysis found something remarkable. Crows could distinguish between a human holding a stick and a human holding a gun. Not just the object itself, the intent behind it. They could tell the difference between a hunter looking up at the trees and a hiker looking down at the path. They understood human body language, better than humans understand theirs. One incredible discovery. The alarm call for human with weapon was completely different from human with umbrella. They understood the intent of the object you were holding. If you walked out with a broom to sweep, they stayed put. If you walked out with a broom to swing at them, they vanished before you even raised your arm. They were reading you like a book, predicting your actions, assessing your threat level in real time based on micro-expressions and body positioning. They had a legal system, and you were constantly being evaluated by it. Up until now, everything researchers discovered suggested crows operated in isolated groups, local flocks with local knowledge. But the AI study revealed something far more expansive. Crows had dialects. A crow in New York sounded different from a crow in London. That made sense. Geographic isolation creates linguistic drift. But the AI found something that shouldn't exist in animal communication. Specific words traveled across dialects like viral memes. A new call might start in a suburb of Chicago. 6 months later, that exact same vocal pattern shows up in St. Louis. Not similar, not adapted, identical. It jumps from flock to flock, traveling hundreds of miles. It's an analog internet. They're relaying information across the continent. This means if a new threat emerges, say a specific type of trap or a new kind of drone, the knowledge of that threat can spread faster than the object itself. They're upgrading their software in real time, learning from each other's experiences without ever meeting face to face. Humans thought we were unique in this ability. We write books. We put things on the internet. We accumulate knowledge across generations and share it globally. But crows have an oral tradition that works just as efficiently. They're not starting from zero every generation. They're standing on the shoulders of the crows that came before them. But here's what made researchers realize the full scope of the network. The AI mapped which calls appeared in which regions and traced them backward to their origin points. What emerged was a picture of constant information flow, a web of communication spanning North America, possibly the world. One researcher asked, "How many crows are in this network?" The answer was staggering. Millions, possibly tens of millions. All connected, all sharing information, all contributing to a collective database of human behavior, threat assessment, and identification. You weren't being watched by a few birds. You were being watched by a civilization. For months, the AI had been silently listening, a digital ghost haunting the canopy, processing terabytes of bioacoustic data, decoding the complex syntax of crow vocalizations, cataloging every squawk, rattle, and click. The algorithm was learning their hierarchy, their warning systems, their gossip. Researchers felt like they were on the brink of the first true interspecies translation. Then everything changed. In the final weeks of the study, the data stream fractured. The crow calls shifted. A new pattern emerged that had never been recorded in ornithological history. Not a regional dialect change, not a seasonal shift, a structural overhaul. A completely new modulation in their vocalizations that didn't fit any existing pattern. The AI's confidence metrics plummeted. Where the machine had been achieving 94% accuracy in decoding crow calls, it suddenly dropped to 23%. Not gradually, sharply, like a switch flipped. The system that had been translating crow language suddenly couldn't understand anything. Researchers watched helplessly as the new vocal patterns spread through local flocks with viral speed. Then it hopped from territory to territory, moving outward, forcing the AI deeper into confusion. The machine wasn't translating anymore. It was just recording noise. But some behaviorists had a theory, a scary one. They think the crows realized they were being watched. Maybe they noticed the microphones hidden in the bark. Maybe they spotted the lenses glinting in the foliage. But more importantly, they noticed something else entirely, the lack of human reaction. Crows are known to test boundaries. They drop nuts in front of cars to gauge reactions. They tease predators to understand response times. This time, the humans weren't shooing them away. They were freezing, observing, recording. The crows realized they were the subjects of an experiment, and they changed their language. The shift might be encryption. It sounds impossible. We think of encryption as uniquely human, born from warfare and mathematics. But these are birds that solve multi-stage physics puzzles, recognize individual faces for 5 years, hold funerals for their dead, pass knowledge down through generations. Is it really so hard to believe they figured out they were being watched and adapted their communication accordingly? They went dark. If the encryption theory is correct, then the silence we're hearing now isn't a lack of communication. It's a secure channel. They have gone dark. They know we're listening, and they've decided to take the conversation private. The chaotic noise the AI is recording now is likely just interference. Chatter meant to confuse the listener, while the real information is passed on a frequency or through a method we haven't even thought to look for yet. Think about what this means. These birds are smart enough to know we're listening, smart enough to hide their speech, smart enough to coordinate a civilization-wide shift in communication protocol. But the terrifying question isn't whether they can do these things. The question is, what are they saying in the shadows? What are they planning now that they know we know? The dynamic has fundamentally shifted. We're no longer the invisible observers looking down at simple creatures. The glass of the terrarium has been tapped from the inside. The game has changed. We're no longer the only ones playing. And here's what researchers can't stop thinking about. The encryption didn't start everywhere at once. It emerged in clusters. Specific regions shifted first, then it spread, which suggests coordination, which suggests communication about the communication itself. They didn't just individually decide to change their language. They organized it. A civilization that can organize a response to being discovered is a civilization with intentions. So the next time you see a crow watching you from a telephone wire, ask yourself, is it just a bird, or is it a scout uploading your face to the network? Is it logging your movements? Is it assessing your threat level? And if they know we're listening, if they've encrypted their language specifically because we broke their code, what happens when they decide the surveillance should go both ways? What happens when they stop just talking and start acting? The answer might already be unfolding above your head.